Oh hi! I'm thinking of entering a competition where I talk about one topic for a long ass time. But the thing is, I can't decide what it should be about.
Undertale? It's a bit overdone.
Ace Attorney? I've tried that like 5 times and it's never worked out.
Doctor Who? I don't really have anything nice to say right now. The Dreamcast? Now this could work.
Now, it's no secret that I love the Dreamcast. It's a pretty unique console, the last ever Sega console, and I would argue that it was their best. Yeah, the Mega Drive is pretty good, but it just doesn't hold the candle that the amazing Dreamcast does. Prologue, 1985 to 1998. So it's the 80s, and Sega have just released their first console in the West, the Master System, and it would go on to sell around 13 million units. That's basically nothing compared to the NES, but overall the Master System is actually a pretty decent console. It's quite popular today. The Sega Mega Drive and Genesis released, and honestly, it took a few years to properly set off. It took about 2 to 3 years between the release of the console to its first proper success in Sonic the Hedgehog. And as we all know by now, Sonic was a hit. And for a while there, Sega was almost beating out Nintendo in market share. But I'd say the last few years of the Genesis is where the console finally started to lose traction, due to some of the awful choices by Sega. And I'm not saying the console failed, not by any means. But the issue is they just don't know when to let go, and they just started losing loads of money on add-ons. Namely the Sega CD and the Sega 32X. And they both really only had like 1 or 2 good games per add-on. The Sega CD was cool for the time, but the 32X, at the time it came out, who cares at this point? Just wait for the Saturn. Speaking of, Sega would receive its first proper failure in the next generation. So the Sega Saturn was, in all honesty, a failure. Does anyone ever actually talk about this thing, other than the fact that it was a failure? This thing had no real Sonic game, the launch was botched, and if you didn't know already, the Sega Saturn's launch was so sudden and so surprising, meaning that A, there was no real hype, and B, retailers were just not ready for the Saturn at that point, and C, customers had no time to save up for the Saturn. And then they also just genuinely wouldn't become that interested in owning one, outside of the odd Sega fanatic.
Hey, don't look at me. I wasn't even born. I do want one though.
And again, as mentioned, there was no real Sonic game, and like it or not, that's an important part of Sega's branding. And so, take away what many would see as the best part of Sega was a pretty foolish idea. Not that Sega didn't try to bring the Blue Brat over to Saturn. He had a few spin-off games and ports, but no real game. The closest we ever got was Sonic Extreme, and I've actually spoken about this game before, but just to recap, the game basically had one of the worst production cycles of all time. In fact, it was so bad and stressful it almost killed the development team. Apparently, all Yuji Naka had to say was good luck when he saw the game. Not to say that the Saturn was wholly bad, there are some pretty great games here, Virtual Fighter for example, or Nights into Dreams, a game that's been on my playlist for years. I might even get around to playing it one day. But overall, the Saturn's just a really weird footnote in Sega's history, and it's usually only ever mentioned as a failure and then looked past. You never see Sega Saturn game compilations. We have a Sega Mega Drive collection for the Xbox 360, and even a Dreamcast collection, but no Saturn. But I thought this was important to mention because we're about to talk about the Dreamcast, and Sega was struggling hard before the Dreamcast came out, and with only 9 million units sold, they were in the gutter. Now, that might not seem like a low number, but compared to the Nintendo 64's 32 million and the PS1's 102 million, Sega knew they had to act fast to save their company and keep their place in the console market. Chapter 1, 1998. The Dreamcast was first revealed in Tokyo on May 21st, 1998, and Sega was holding a competition to actually name its newest system, with over 5,000 entries before they eventually chose the name Dreamcast. Coming from the words dream and cast as in broadcast. Sega had spent between 50 to 80 million pounds on hardware development, and up to 200 million on software development, and then 300 million on worldwide promotion. So it was up to the launch to make this thing a success. Are Sega going to be able to make a profit from this, or are they going to fail?
Well, let's find out.
Would you believe that the launch was actually a success? Well, kinda. The console sold out within the day, and that sounds good on paper, but if you look behind the scenes, well, firstly, Sega actually had to stop pre-orders because they simply couldn't get a hold of the parts needed to make the system, and so that meant they had to sell less. And then obviously that affected sales, another poor launch for Sega, but definitely an improvement over the last one. I mean, at least the console sold out, right? Well, even that said, according to Wikipedia, Sega said they could have sold another 200 to 300,000 units had they had the supplies needed. And I mean, that's an amazing amount on launch day. However, due to these issues, they only ever managed to sell 150,000 units on launch. Still a decent amount, but it's definitely lower than Sega had hoped. And games-wise, only one of the games really sold well. Virtua Fighter 3. The standout title for the Dreamcast, Sonic Adventure 1, was meant to launch on launch day, but unfortunately, being delayed by a few weeks meant it would then be launched on the 23rd of December 1998, just in time for the holidays. And I mean, this game was, at the time, revolutionary. I mean, this game is why I don't believe Sonic had a rough transition to 3D. I mean, okay, looking back now, yeah, the game is admittedly quite clunky, but I mean, obviously it is compared to modern games now. Back in 1998, this game was like no other, and to be honest, I'd say it was the last revolutionary thing Sonic's ever done. I mean, look at Chaos for example, an enemy made out entirely of water, something never done before, and that's quite a common theme of this era actually. Games set around or near water, just to show off how great they can handle water. The Dreamcast did this too. I mean, the first level of Sonic Adventure 2 is set on a beach. Besides Virtua Fighter 3, the Dreamcast launched with 3 other games in Japan, those being Godzilla Generations, July, and Pen-Pen's Triathlon. And out of those 3, I'm most familiar with Godzilla, having emulated it once before. From what I remember was, well, it was okay. I'm not a big Godzilla fan in all honesty, but I had fun with it. I'm not really itching to play it again, but it was a solid launch title for the system.
July is a tricky one because, from what I hear, it only ever released in Japan, and I've only found one article about it online saying that it is a disturbingly bland choose-your-own-adventure style video game that just happened to be on the Dreamcast. And I think that's a shame because the cover art looks good, but I don't have the time, interest, or money to import this game and a Japanese Dreamcast over to this country, so I'm not going to do that and I'll just stick with word of mouth. However, the other game that released alongside this in the Dreamcast, well, let's talk about it.
Pen-Pen's Triathlon, or just known as Pen-Pen in Europe, is a racing game, and as of speaking, the closest copy in any CX in the country is literally halfway across the country and a 4-hour train journey away from me. So I've decided to not get the game.
I bought the game.
Well, actually I emulated it, but this game is, to say the least, weird as fuck, and I mean that in a good way. I mean, it's a penguin racing game. It is kind of fun. That said, Pen-Pen is genuinely one of the weirdest games I've ever seen, and again, I mean that in a good way. It's got that type of style that kind of reminds me of Tomodachi Life, with the way that like photos of real life fit in with the game characters, in like the loading screens and the game itself. I mean, it's fun. I don't see how this was really a release game for the Dreamcast, but it's a pretty unique racing game. It's pretty fun. 7 out of 10.
If only I could play with people online, then this would be the perfect system. The Dreamcast launched with an online service. Kinda.
I've actually spoken about Dreamcast online functions in the past, but I will recap them here for the sake of the argument. In Japan, the Dreamcast had Dreamcast, and it launched around 1 month before the Dreamcast did with some very basic internet functions like email. However, come the launch of the Dreamcast, the service was expanded, and it would basically turn your Dreamcast into a computer of sorts, allowing you to connect to the internet and chat to people, and obviously, play with people. This was the first time any major video game console had done this. But you'd be shocked to learn that the ability to do this wasn't built into the console itself. Instead, you had to get a disc known as a Dream Passport to access these features. And stuff like this is really cool to me. Like, yeah, sure, you'd have to get a passport to use the internet like it's some far-off land. It's just not the sort of thing you would get these days. The service would be expanded twice with Dream Passport 2 and 3, with 3 being the best one that allowed you to rent some games from Sega's back catalogue at a very small cost. The service would actually last as long as 2007, being the longest online service for the Dreamcast, but I'm sure hardly anyone was using this by then. However, the biggest event for the Dreamcast in 1998 was the release of Incoming.
I joke. This game's pretty boring. I did get a mint condition version like 3 years ago, and that's why I'm mentioning it. But yeah, it's pretty mid, 5 out of 10. And that was the launch of the Dreamcast in Japan. How did it compare in other countries? Well, let's go and find out.
Chapter 2, 1999. So, having a slightly less favourable launch in Japan, Sega was hoping to pick up some sales and have sold 1 million units by the end of February 1999. But no, sadly they only managed 900,000, being just shy of their goal. Perhaps if they'd had the needed parts at launch, they'd have achieved their goal. There's a few reports of people actually returning their Dreamcasts in order to buy new games for the PS1. I bet that felt really soul-crushing for the people at Sega. So what really happened in 1999 before the release? Well, the first Soul Calibur released. I haven't played much Soul Calibur in my lifetime. I mean, I first played it when it came to Switch 2, and whilst I think it's quite fun, I'm not really rushing to play it again. But it's worth mentioning, as this was a pretty rare instance of the home release being a better version of the game than the original arcade version. A pretty big achievement, and that shows just how great the Dreamcast could be when given a chance. However, the biggest thing to happen to the Dreamcast in 1999, before the worldwide launch, would be Seaman.
So I'm not gonna sit here and pretend like I know everything about Seaman. I've never played it, it never released in this country. But for what I'm seeing, it's a pretty cool game. The APGN made a pretty good video about it a couple of years ago, and based on that I can at least talk about the game.
In the game, you speak into the microphone that comes with the game and talk to Seaman, and he actually talks back. And unlike Hey You Pikachu, the game's actually pretty decent at picking up what you say. That said, I'm pretty sure he'd have an issue picking up my northern language.
He'd say something like, "What are you doing this week?" And I'd say, "Hey man, I'm going up on choo-choo train to Birmingham." And I just don't think he'd know what I'm saying.
But I mean, the game is shockingly well made for 1999. It's a game I will play one day, once I can get an American Dreamcast and a copy of the games in my hands. And without the first-hand experience, I can't properly explain to you why it's so cool. It just is.
But enough about Japan. We're now on the 9th of the 9th of the 99th. Basically, it's the launch of the Dreamcast in America. 11 whole months since it released in Japan. And it's not that good.
Before the console even began, Sega had a little spat with EA when they announced that they would no longer be making any games for the system. And I mean, at the time, EA was one of the biggest gaming companies, and with EA saying Sega's not acting like a competent hardware company, it was just like a nail in the coffin for the Dreamcast already. And despite what you might think about EA these days, there's no doubt that EA's refusal to work on the Dreamcast has hurt the image of the system, especially in the West. That would mean that no games that we now see to be staples of the industry, such as FIFA or Madden, were released for the system. That isn't to say that the Dreamcast had no sports games. Famously, NFL 2K was released for the system, and this was heavily marketed for the system's launch in America. And despite the spat with EA, Sega was more than confident this time to ensure an amazing launch in the US. With 10 months of Dreamcast experience under their belts, Sega launched the system to 200,000 on the first day, and 500,000 within 2 weeks, and by November, Sega had sold 1 million units in America, giving them 32% of the American market share. It was an amazing launch. It possibly helped that at the time the system actually launched with Sonic Adventure 1, meaning that fans of Sonic, most Sega fans, would then have a really good reason to buy the game. That, and the part that Sega had the parts needed to actually make the Dreamcast possible, meant that the launch was a definite success.
So the console launched with 19 games. That's impressive for a video game system. And I'm not going to talk about them all, but I will name them.
So, the Dreamcast launched with Air Force Delta, Aero Rings, Blue Stringer, Expandable, Flag to Flag, House of the Dead 2, Hydro Thunder, Monaco Grand Prix, Mortal Kombat Gold, NFL 2K, NFL Blitz 2000, Pen Triathlon, Power Stone, Ready to Rumble Boxing, Sonic Adventure, Soul Calibur, TNN Motorsports, Hardcore Heat, Tokyo Extreme Racer, and Trick Style.
Okay, so I've not heard of most of these or played most of them, but it's still an impressive launch lineup. There's practically something for everyone here. But what was the online service like?
Well, strangely, it took almost a year before the Dreamcast released an online service in America. They called it SegaNet. And the embarrassing thing is, it didn't even last a year. That's right, the Dreamcast in America had less time with an online service than it did with one. And I mean, you could still play online games until 2003, but the online service was shut down very quickly. Sega also did some embarrassing stuff around this time, but I'll save that bit for a bit later on. Overall, SegaNet was pretty shit. That's not to say it wasn't popular at first. The system actually launched with quite a big base of users within the first month, but this quickly died down, and Sega closed down the service after like 9 months. At least they kept with the number 9 theme in America that the Dreamcast had going for it. But what was it like in the UK? Well, obviously it wasn't as big in America, but nothing ever really is in Europe. Launching at £200, which is £386.47 today. That's not that bad, really. I mean, the Switch, for example, costs slightly more than that, and the Xbox and PS5 cost more than that, so to be honest, I'd say it's a pretty good price for the console, especially considering the country is in a better place than it is now. The system launched with practically the same games as America. However, instead of 19, there was 13 games launched with the system. Obviously, there were some events all around the continent. For example, France had VIPs promote the console, and in the 2000-2001 football season, the Saint Argentine football team actually had a Dreamcast sponsorship, which is pretty cool to be fair. There was a pretty big launch in London with big machines set to test the console, something I would kill to own. With some famous faces from the times coming down, the only person I know is Chris Eubank, who was a boxer, but the only reason I really know him was that he was in the original Celebrity Big Brother where he finished 6th out of 6th, being the first person to ever be evicted from the Celebrity Big Brother house.
Sorry, my Big Brother autism took over for a moment there. Right, back to the Dreamcast.
In Europe, we got Dream Arena as our internet connection service, and I think it has the coolest name in my opinion. And ours actually launched on the same day as the Dreamcast itself, and somehow it managed to last until 2003. The service didn't actually launch in all of Europe at the same time, but in phases. It first launched in the UK, Italy, France, Germany and Spain, and they were just genuinely a decent online service for the Dreamcast. And then, finally, the system launched in Australia on the 30th of November 1999. It was meant to launch in September, but in true Dreamcast fashion, there was an issue that caused the launch to be delayed. Personally, if I lived in Australia and that happened, I'd have flown down to America and brought a Dreamcast, fly back, just to play Sonic Adventure 2 months early, just as God had intended. The online functions here are called Korma, and honestly, besides the fact that it caused the launch to be delayed, there isn't much to talk about here.
Besides the launch of the system in other countries, I think the biggest thing to happen for the Dreamcast this year was the launch of Shenmue.
This game was a massive game, spanning 4 different discs. The game has gained a cult following, and in my opinion is one of the best Dreamcast games out there. And it may shock you to find out, as it did for me, that the game did not actually gain a profit from the 1 million sales it had achieved, making it a failure financially, as it was one of the highest budgeted games ever. That did not stop the game from getting a sequel in 2001, a remaster in 2018, and a third game releasing in 2019, as well as an anime adaptation releasing in 2022. The game's still relevant to this day, and I think that's pretty amazing. The game itself, well, I think it can drag at times, but overall, I've had fun with what I've played. I've never beaten it, sure, but it's still quite fun. It might be something I might get back to doing soon.
And so things were starting to finally go Sega's way. I mean, the system had launched all around the world, mostly successfully. Of course, there was a few hiccups, but overall, it was a success. But the following year would see Sega's biggest fear arrive in the shape of the PS2.
Chapter 3, 2000.
So, in the new year, Sega was panicking. I mean, they'd set themselves a goal to sell 5 million consoles by the end of last year. They'd only sold 3 million. The PS2 was 2 months away. But was all of this Sega's fault? Well, let's find out.
Yeah, but they still tried. I mean, some great games came out for the Dreamcast this year. Perhaps most notably, Phantasy Star Online. Yeah, alright, at the end of the year, but still, this game's pretty good from all accounts. Yeah, it's one of those that falls into my haven't played but know of its existence for a long time type game. Phantasy Star Online is one of the first online RPGs. I've heard it's pretty good, and it got a port to Windows and GameCube, so it can't be that bad. This game was officially supported in Japan up to 2007, and there are still fans that support this game to this day. There was also an offline mode, but I hear it's a bit harder than online, and to be honest, I don't plan to play the game unless I do it online, because that's where the charm is for me. But as I said, it was the end of the year, so what did they do before this game?
Well, you probably noticed that I only have mentioned something that happened at the end of the year. So, what about the rest of it?
Yes, well no, I joke. It wasn't the strongest year for the cast. I mean, there were still some high points, like for example,
Jet Set Radio!
I played this game so much as a child. It's yet another game that got ported to the Xbox 360, and that is where I first played the game. I mean, yeah, I've played this game so much. I've played so much of the first level. Yeah, okay, so I never actually bought the game, but hear me out, it's still really fun, and okay. I tell a small lie, I have played a bit of the game past the first level on the Dreamcast. Not that I could tell you much what happens, but still, the game oozes personality and charm. And of course, I wouldn't have blamed them if they did. Another game that came out this year was Crazy Taxi. It's an arcade port that's now on the Dreamcast. And I think that's something that plagues all of Sega's consoles, to be honest. I mean, arcade ports can be cool, but 9 times out of 10, once you've played it, most of the time it pretty much just ends up being a worse version of the arcade game. And arcade games are pretty limited really, you're not going to get a full, amazing story or anything. And I mean, in the context of an arcade machine, then they work really well. But for playing at home, what's the point? That said, Crazy Taxi is a really fun game, and I really recommend that you try it out at some point. It's pretty cheap on Dreamcast, and it was on the PS2 and Xbox. It used to be on Steam, but they've removed it sadly. The game was also released on the 7th generation of consoles with the Dreamcast Collection, and overall, it's just a really fun game, showing that the Dreamcast didn't just need Sonic to be fun.
I'll come out and say it, the Dreamcast could have succeeded, but
2000 was the year of the PS2, and that was basically when it was all over for Sega. Honestly, it's shocking they didn't throw the towel in March 2000. I mean, it's going up against the PlayStation 2. I'd give up before they even enter the ring. I mean, let's look at this thing. It's the sequel to the PlayStation. It's the most sold video game console, allegedly, ever. And I have a PS2, and I fucking love the thing. It is genuinely the best console that released this generation, but oh my god, imagine having to go up against that. As I say, it's very impressive they didn't just give up, but PS2 is, for good reason, the best-selling console of all time. I mean, for a start, it's a sequel to the PlayStation. Of course it was meant to do well. And not just that, it was also a DVD player. This was a big deal in 2000. And I mean, now we look at a console and it's honestly cooler when it doesn't play a DVD. But those days, that was what made or broke the PS2. And I mean, the PS2 plays all of the latest games and DVDs? What a deal, said people in 2000. And as I said, the PS2 plays all the new games beside the odd handful. And if it's not on PlayStation, it's not worth playing. And the people knew that. I mean, the system sold 1.6 million on launch, and that is crazy because they went up against the PS2. It's because Sega don't know what the fuck they're doing. I mean, how do you fuck up 4 times in a row? I mean, this isn't just bad luck. Let's review. Sega CD, failure. Sega 32X, failure. Sega Saturn, failure. Dreamcast, say it with me folks, failure. Even if this entire thing is about how I like the Dreamcast.
this console was just genuinely doomed to fail from the start. I mean, to start with, they were made by Sega. Sega can't make a video game console to save their lives. They can barely even make a video game. I mean, the only reason I think that Sega had success with the Mega Drive was more out of luck than anything else. I mean, look at how they were handling it in the last few years with all of the add-ons. Have you ever used a Mega Drive? It's not as good as the Super Nintendo in my opinion.
I mean, really, console-wise, the Mega Drive is the only true success Sega's had in the console market. I mean, the Master System was very popular in places like Brazil, but worldwide, it's kind of like, I mean, I played a few Master System games, but again, it's It's okay at best. Please don't attack me, 40-year-olds. But, besides that, Sega's just failed at everything else. It's honestly shocking we even got the Dreamcast. I mean, I credit Sega to the fact that they kept trying, but perhaps that is partly what screwed Sega up. I mean, going into the Dreamcast era, Sega had practically nothing to fall back on money-wise, and unless the Dreamcast was a success, they were fucked.
Well, I'm talking about it. What do you think happened?
Yeah, I mean, Sega was struggling this year, and that's pretty obvious to see at this year's E3. Oh my god, where do I begin here? Well, to be fair, they had a pretty decent showing this year, and they actually won the Best Game award for that year with Jet Set Radio. Pretty good, to be fair. I mean, at this point, Sega was just desperate. They were offering up a free Dreamcast with a mouse and keyboard if you signed up for SegaNet for 2 years. They were genuinely just trying to get rid of these things any way they could. I mean, it's pretty desperate, but can you blame them? They needed a player base, and fast. And to be fair, that's a really good deal, but I mean, if you need to practically give them away for free, you're never going to succeed. And that's a shame.
I think overall, 2000 is the weakest year for the Dreamcast. I mean, sure, 1 year did have to be the weakest, but with this being the only full year where your console is fully active in every part of the world, it's not a good look for Sega.
No matter what Sega did, it just wouldn't help. Like, they'd released some great games for their system and literally nothing. No one wanted anything to do with this thing. And, I mean, can you really blame them? Some amazing games came out for this thing, but just no one wants to touch it. Like, how did they go from such a massive launch to total failure in such a small amount of time? I mean, yeah, the PS2 is a titan, but come on, you can't just blame the PS2 for the Dreamcast. And I mean, I'm sure EA not being involved in the Dreamcast had something to do with this. I mean, I know people in the UK who get games consoles almost exclusively to play FIFA and other sports games. So then to take that out of your console lineup would really hurt your success, even in 1999. But I doubt EA being involved would have helped save the system. I reckon it would have been, a couple 100,000 users if lucky. And whilst we're talking about the errors the system suffers, the games were ridiculously easy to pirate. Literally, all you need to do is burn the files onto a disc, and bang, you can pirate any game. And burning discs was like the thing everyone did in 2000, so no doubt that made it even harder for Sega to profit. I mean, the GameCube, for example. Even though its mini discs did hurt the system in some ways, it made piracy much harder, meaning you pretty much had to get the games from Nintendo. And I'm not going to talk like I'm some kind of expert on piracy, but if it's so easy that even I can do it, then maybe you've got a problem.
So 2000 ended, and Sega practically knew what was going to happen next. But let's find out exactly what did happen.
Chapter 4, 2001.
So here we are, 2001. Practically the end. This is our final stop. But I'm sure Sega put up a good fight, right? I mean, I'm sure there's no way they gave up instantly. No, they announced that they'd stop making the Dreamcast on the 31st of January, and then by March, done. And to be honest with you, it's kind of sad.
I mean, Sega had been in the console market for so long now. Sony hadn't even been in the console market for a decade at this point. And yet here we are seeing the PS2 just outclass the Dreamcast in every way possible. And with the GameCube on the way, and any potential future Dreamcast owners would just most likely go there. And hell, you don't even need to use the Dreamcast as a way to be different anymore, since the Xbox was coming out. So why not just use that as a way to be different from others? The writing was on the wall, and to be honest, credit to Sega for even fighting for this long. Absolutely sucked that this is how their days as a console maker ended. But Sega weren't going to let the Dreamcast die without one final swan song with sequels to some of the best games on the system, starting with Crazy Taxi 2. The game's pretty similar to the original in many respects. The game allows for the taxi to just jump and dash now, and carry more passengers. And having played both in my time, I would say that I personally find this version a bit more fun and chaotic, but both are definitely worth a try if you are even slightly interested in these games. And then there's Shenmue 2. Having never actually finished the first one, I've never played the second one, but from all accounts, is actually better than the original. But despite that, the game sold worse. The game was developed alongside the original, and then this game got some great reviews at the time, getting like 90 out of 100. But it still sold poorly, so it's still a failure. Sega also released Phantasy Star Online version 2, basically just a better version of the original, and yes, it's still playable today thanks to the effort of fans. And of course, the greatest game to release for the Dreamcast ever, the long-awaited sequel for a fan game on the Dreamcast. Sega Bass Fishing 2, the greatest game of all time. It's my favourite, it's just so fun, and it's definitely not me just taking the piss. Obviously I'm talking about Sonic Adventure 2. I mean, I've spoken about this game like a million times, and every time it's the same story. Oh, I love this game, and it's my favourite, and I'm not going to dwell on the game for too long, because I think if I spent any more time talking about this game, I might actually be stuck in a time loop. But just very quickly, this game was a really perfect way to win the Dreamcast. It's a really good fucking Sonic game, with a great story that was just focused on making a good game instead of selling the system. I mean, had this game launched with the Dreamcast, I don't think it would have sold well, but I think it would have sold better. And this game has an ending that so perfectly fits with Sega's situation at the time. Sonic looking back at the camera and saying farewell for the final time. Almost like Sega is saying farewell to its time as a console maker. Quite a bittersweet moment for the system, and Sega as a whole. It's a shame that this was released as a final hurrah for the system, because I would say that Sonic Adventure 2 is the greatest Dreamcast game, and I couldn't think of a better way to end the system. And so, Sega had left the console market, almost bankrupt and with a sore ego. They announced that they would now become a third-party developer only, and would soon begin work on bringing the best bits of the Dreamcast over to other systems this generation. Most notably at my eyes, at E3 2001, they showcased Jet Set Radio Future, coming exclusively to the Xbox in 2002. And I mean, let's give Sega some credit, they waste no time getting stuck into these other consoles. Sega also very quickly started to move into the GameCube space, as it would make sense that many Dreamcast fans would ship over to the GameCube in the wake of the death of the Dream. I mean, they released Super Monkey Ball for the system's launch alongside a Crazy Taxi port. And I mean, who doesn't love Super Monkey Ball? It's just a really fun game, pretty much no matter what. But this new friendship with Nintendo only really became apparent when the Blue Blur finally made his appearance on the Nintendo console with Sonic Adventure 2 Battle, an enhanced port of the game. But whilst Sega lost the war, I think becoming allies with Nintendo has done the company more good than the Dreamcast ever would have done. There were even some rumours of Sega being bought by Nintendo, but they weren't true. But I bet seeing Sonic on a Nintendo console in 2001 was either cool as fuck or a massive kick in the teeth for Sega fans. But before we finish, let's have a quick fire round of all of the games that I own that aren't Sonic related and I haven't mentioned yet. Olympics game. It's your standard sports compilation game. It's pretty fun, but what else is there to say? Well, I absolutely suck at the game. I mean, I played every minigame at least once, and every time I would get last place and just lose. I have honestly no idea how to win at any of these games. Is it bad? No, not at all. But is it good? No, not at all. It's just your standard game that ties into the Olympics. Give me Sonic and Mario any day over regular Olympic games. Now this is my contender for Game of the Year 1998. Well, I joke, but wow. Any Who Wants to Be a Millionaire game is enjoyable. Well, almost any game. But this game is among the first Millionaire games to be released, alongside a PS1 port and a PC port. It's quite decent for a first attempt, only released in the UK and France, and in our version, Chris Tarrant's voice ominously talked over the game. A parody of the game also released called Who Wants to Beat Up a Millionaire, where the game was practically the same, you just beat up a millionaire whilst answering questions. One of these parodies of millionaires is actually Donald Trump, known here as Ronald Hump. So, as a launch title in the US, is this game a good representation for the Dreamcast? Kinda. Janky cameras, shitty cutscenes aside, this game is pretty fun. Some weird ass lines that wouldn't be said today. And I mean, with the little of this game I've played, it actually seems pretty compelling so far. Fun fact about this game is that this game actually released in America in 1999, a few days earlier than the Dreamcast did. So you could just own the game before anyone else had a Dreamcast, and you could, I don't know, look at it, I guess? So, as a Japanese launch title, how does this game stand out? Well, I mean, it's pretty fun to be fair. It's a good fighting game, but that's the issue. I don't like fighting games. So, yeah, okay, for me, I'm not really a big fan, but do I think it's one of the better ones I've ever played? I like the music, it's pretty nice to the ear, but again, I don't really like fighting games, so what is there to do? And that said, this is also a fighting game, and it is way more fun in my opinion. It's genuinely so fun. I actually really like the Power Stone thing that gives you a powered up form, and then it gives you an incentive to actually move around the map, as well as the throwable items and the weapons that just spawn in. This game is genuinely really fun, and it's one of the only fighting games I like. In fact, I like it so much I want to play the sequel one day. Yeah, this game's crazy. It's pretty fun and it's worth a try if you get to it. It's not like the greatest thing you'll ever play, but if you get a few friends to play with you, it can be a pretty fun game. This game's pretty chaotic, but really good for what it is. And fun fact, it's actually how I got myself a copy of Dreamcast 1.5. Yeah, so my copy doesn't work, but apparently this was supposed to be the final game in Tomb Raider, and one singular level was bundled in with copies of the UK newspaper The Times. And having emulated it, yeah, I actually quite enjoy the game. I wish my copy had worked. A sequel to a game I've never played before. This game is pretty boring, and it's honestly nothing special. It's literally a video game of all time. It's not bad, I just failed to care about it really. I only mention it because I happen to own it. As my first exposure to Resident Evil, I gotta say, yeah, I don't like it. It's pretty clunky in the controls, and honestly just boring. Now Scarlett Jones, however, she loves Resident Evil.
Yo, coming in from my prison cell, Code Veronica, right? Obviously it's not as good as the other Resident Evil games, but it does serve as a good bridge. Plus, moving camera, I mean, way better, makes the other games so much better. That's all I have to say.
Perhaps it's worth mentioning that the Dreamcast did continue to get exclusive games for it all the way up till about 2007 in Japan, but no one was buying them. Like, be for real, have you ever heard anyone actually buy a game for the Dreamcast outside of like 2001? It was over, and Sega knew it, so, you know. Rest in peace, Dreamcast. 1998 to 2001. Or 2007, depending how you look at it.
Chapter 5, Ongoing Efforts.
But that's not all. This console is still alive. Fans are keeping the Dreamcast alive and releasing games for it to this day. So let's talk about it.
And I think that's amazing, and it speaks to truly how amazing this console is. I mean, I haven't played any fan games yet, but I mean, it's genuinely amazing how many games are here. There's practically any type of game or ports of games like Counter-Strike built on the Half-Life port that was originally intended for the Dreamcast before being cancelled in 2001 after some hiccups in development, and then was eventually brought over to the PS2. This game was actually how Half-Life Blue Shift was made for this release, but again, the game was cancelled. However, the game itself, it was practically finished before it was cancelled, and if you burn it onto a disc, you can play it on a Dreamcast, no problem.
Now, I would love to connect my Dream... And the online system, that's also back too. Fans have brought it back like it's some kind of Nintendo console. And I would love to connect my Dreamcast to the Wi-Fi. But unfortunately, I just don't have the time or money to do that because I'd need to mod my console, I'd have to somehow connect it to uni Wi-Fi. What is there to do? But from what I've seen, yeah, there's a pretty active fan base. Games like Phantasy Star Online, for example, that still has players. And I think that's amazing.
I mean, to do so, I'd have to take apart this precious console of mine. And I'm not looking to do that right now. Just to break the thing, and I also can't afford a spare console, or even a pre-modded one. Maybe one day. But currently I'm alright with just having the one. Well, if I was to say get a new one, I would love one in the box. I just need the money. I mean, just talking about this damn thing has cost me 160 quid on a few games to have footage and whatnot. But I mean, I'm not full of money. I could barely afford the games, but saw that as a worthy investment. But anyway, the online capabilities that are upkept by fans are really cool, and worth it if you are particularly interested in this console and its online capabilities. Pretty amazing. Like, let's be real, The idea that this little machine from 1998 that only sold 9 million units can somehow inspire so many people to work together and keep it alive in the modern day is amazing. My closing thoughts.
Well, here we are. The final part. The Dreamcast genuinely means so much to me. It was the first retro console I ever played, and for that reason and that reason alone it'll have a special place in my heart. But it's an oddity. It's different. It's cool. I don't know. But I love it, and I always will. Call me a loser all you want. It's an amazing console.
Looking back at everything I've said, this console genuinely has such an aura, and whenever I play it, I get feelings that I don't get from anything else. I can't really describe it, but I just love everything about this console. It's kind of like how I love everything about Doctor Who. It's the exact same feeling.
The Dreamcast will always mean something to me. It has a special place in my heart because it is special. It's the birthplace of two of my favourite video games, and it's just a fun console to learn about. I mean, that's why I did this. It was just fun to learn about, fun to talk about. And I don't think I'll ever have anything like this in my life again, and I will continue to learn about this console for the rest of my life. Or until I'm bored with it. So, probably next week. Anyway, let's see how I did in that little competition. And now, I can reveal that the winner of Talk About Something for a really long time because you're a proper loser is Joe Bipple with the Dreamcast. Wow, what a proper loser. Alright, yes, I'm the biggest loser in the world. Ah,